All right, I think we're basically live for the program here today, so we'll see if I'm actually live. I think it is. All right, welcome back to another live stream Ask Me Anything episode at We the Governed, and thanks for joining me on a Tuesday night. Again, I'm going to try to pretty much every Tuesday, unless I've got a speaking engagement somewhere, we will be doing these live streams, and I'm trying to standardize it at 6 p.m. for the most part so that it's fairly predictable for those who like to log in and watch these regularly. If you are logging in after the fact and you are seeing this long after the program's done, which thousands of people tend to see it that way, feel free to put your questions, if you have them, for me down in the comment section down below. And I usually try to get back to questions even if they aren't during the live stream. But if you want to have your questions addressed on the live stream, just make sure that you go, it kind of depends on what type of device you're using, but it could be below or it could be to the side of where you're watching this video right now, and you can type in a question and I am probably going to see it and I will do my best to answer it. No guarantees. The only thing I ask, and you can kind of see if it stays at the top of the question area for a little while anyway, if you do the @We the Governed, it just pops up there, makes it a little more visible, because what inevitably happens with most of these live streams is that a lot of people start jumping on and asking a lot of questions, or there's a lot of commentary back and forth, and I'm trying to go through and find your questions so that I can do my best to answer them. And if I can't find them, sometimes I skip over them. Now, that's not on purpose. Believe me, I know I've had people who were convinced that I was discriminated against their questions, and I wasn't. I just missed them in the just the wide, long list of all these questions that were going on at the same time. So that's just it. We have, like I said, I do these live streams once a week right now, and I don't have any plans to increase my live stream output. But for those of you who are regular viewers of my channel and have seen a lot more of the video work that I've been doing, you'll probably notice there's basically two changes, at least I'm hoping that you're noticing. There's two changes that I've been doing just more recently on the channel. One of the changes is really, I am trying to periodically put up a video that just says, hey, here's 5 stories or 6 stories or some number of stories recently you might have missed, and here's my take on them, and I do a countdown on those videos. Part of the reason why I'm doing that is I realized I was largely just leaving whole stories by the wayside because I didn't have enough time to prep a really a legitimate sort of analysis or presentation on that particular subject, so I couldn't really get to a full video production, I guess, for lack of a better term. And the other one, and so that I found when I did those, people did respond very positively. It also allowed me to cover a number of subjects in the same video in a more condensed format, but at least enough that for people who do watch my channel regularly, it gives them a little bit more of an oversight of maybe stories that they could be missing in Washington State. So I try to make those focus mostly on Washington State issues or subjects, things that actually impact us here in the state of Washington. However, I've had very positive feedback on that, and so a lot of you have asked me to continue to do that. I've got a lot of comments on it, and the views on those videos seem to justify continuing to do that. So I'm going to try to at least do one of those a week moving forward. I recently did a couple. I did one right before Thanksgiving, and then I did one that launched, I believe this morning actually, that I produced last night, that really covered some of the stuff that happened kind of over the Thanksgiving holiday that really probably very easy to miss, because most regular people that aren't political junkies, you are with family, you're working on projects, you're going shopping, you're planning for Christmas, you're taking advantage of what for many people is probably a 4-day weekend. And so the last thing you're wanting to pay attention to is the absurdity and craziness of the political process in Washington State, or generally just around the country. So that's why I have been doing those, and it is a bit of a change to the channel, a little bit, in the sense that I'll probably try to make sure I do at least one of those a week. The second thing that I've actually wanted to do for a long time. But many of you know that I travel around the state a lot. I do lots of presentations, whether it's the Doge Washington training classes I've been doing this year, or just general activist training, or speaking engagements, or a lot of stuff like that. I travel around the state a lot. On average, I believe I drive between 30 and 40,000 miles a year, pretty much most of that in Washington state. And the one thing I realize, and I've always been pretty mobile in the state, even back as soon as I got a driver's license, I've traveled the state a lot, and I have a really lot of appreciation for Washington, not just being a fifth generation Washingtonian, but just driving around and seeing the many beautiful sights and many interesting things all over Washington state. And so because of that, I realized that and part of this was also taking my kids out around on different trips over the years, and I would have something to say about some little, some site that we passed, or when my car broke down there, or a camp out that we had there, or a hunting trip, or visiting a family member, or whatever it was. And so I realized that there was an interest in me just doing some of these little short videos, just talking about Washington State and what's so great about Washington State, which is kind of the theme today, about why Washington State is really worth saving. And so I started here just this last week. I decided, okay, I'd start making a point. I was going out to a Doge Washington training class out in Clarkston here 2 weeks ago. And I just happened to be driving right by the Stonehenge over there in Goldendale, the one that built by Sam Hill that overlooked the Columbia River. So I thought I'd start with that video. So I'm kind of getting used to doing these short videos, and it's a little different editing process. And I'm just trying to do a decent job in presenting some of these videos of just things I'm doing as I go around the state. If you saw earlier this week, I did launch a video, I think it was on Monday. I just happened to be not far from Union, Washington. I'd gone out to the peninsula to have my wife and I went on a hike, and I decided that on the way back we just run by Union, and I did a little just stop by the Water Wheel, a place that I've visited ever since I was a kid. There's a lot of family history in that area. And then also another video that I haven't launched yet, but I went up to the Pioneer Cemetery in Union and also did a little quick video there. My great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother and great-aunt and uncle are actually buried in that cemetery. So I just did a quick video up there as well. And I'm just trying to do these little snippet videos around Washington State. I don't intend it to take away from the core content that I've been producing for years and plan to produce at a lot more higher tempo moving forward. But it's really just, I hope that it's kind of viewed more as it augments the other content that I have on the channel. And so they're mainly just shorts, which means they're going to be less than 3 minutes. Probably some of them will be like a minute or so. And mostly they'll just be this travel type stories as I drive around the state. I drive around the state so often, and there's so much to see in Washington State. And the one thing I find is that if you grow up here, a lot of times you take it for granted. Or even if you didn't grow up here, you don't take it for granted, most people tend to get kind of insular, and they don't really leave their neighborhood or their community much outside of their commute to work. And maybe that occasional weekend trip, they don't really leave that part of Washington State that they live in. So it's very easy for most people to get in a rut, not necessarily be familiar with all the cool stuff that there is out all over Washington State. So anyway, I just have... it's kind of fun, and maybe it's also partially having the kids move out, and then I kind of moving, as they go to college or they go to the Air Force Academy or whatever it is they're doing, and you start to realize that there's you're not taking them around, so much, doing these cool things with them around the state. So partially, we'll just see how that goes. So anyway, I hope that that those videos, you find them useful too. A lot of people that seem to watch those are new viewers, so some of them will watch those videos and then they subscribe to the channel. So there's some motivation that I have in doing it from that perspective as well. But those will be two changes I think that you're going to see. It on the video channel moving forward, and I'm just curious on your feedback or if you have anything interesting about that, and hopefully I will be able to share a lot more as I move forward. I'm hoping I've got a couple other stops I want to do. Some of you know from just my bio that my dad was heavily involved in starting the city of Newcastle back in the 90s. And when they did finally develop our old farm up there, there's like a Morgan Heritage Park in this little neighborhood. It's nothing super special or fancy, but I can still go there today and remember kind of the layout of the farm. And I think there's still a fence line that's up from the farm. I'm not totally sure about that, so I'm going to go back up there to Newcastle, I think, later this week and see if I can get a video about that. And that's kind of fun. And maybe I'm going to be boring you and you won't be interested at all, but that's okay. I'm going to do it anyway, and you just tell me what you think. So let's just jump in here. The topic today is why Washington State is worth saving. And, obviously I'm very biased about this because I am a fifth generation Washingtonian. Have 26 cousins. I had 27, but I only have 26 now, who most of whom still live kind of roughly in Washington. Some are in Eastern Washington. A few of them have moved out. Lots of them still have connections coming back and forth, and they range over the gamut. I mean, that's just the cousins, not including aunts and uncles. And of course, if you've been here this many generations, I discover people that I'm related to because I hadn't heard about them because of some dispute the family had 100 years ago, and I didn't know about it. And so two branches of the family stopped talking back then. And then you discover generations down the road. Then when you run into them by accident, you discover actually we're related. And that's kind of fun. There's a lot of fun history for me in the state, and I like relating that to other people. Washington State is actually an amazing place to live. We may have clowns and crooks in government. That's probably true. No disputing that. We have some of the biggest clowns and probably some of the worst crooks in government. But despite that, the state itself is amazing with an incredible history. And we've overcome corrupt and dishonest politicians in the past, and we will inevitably do that in the future. But we definitely are going through a phase where the politicians are doing their best to harm the people of Washington State. And the Democrat Party, of course, is cheerleading that whole process on. Of course, they're not alone, and we can talk about some of that as we move forward. But I believe that Washington, especially after I lived on the East Coast as a college student for 4 years and traveled around the East Coast quite a bit back then, and also because I had jobs, a number of jobs where I did a lot of traveling around America. And I love America, and I love traveling around America, and there's a lot of amazing places to see, and I have friends throughout the country. But I also had a chance to spend a lot of time in a lot of other parts of the country, and there's no other place I'd rather live. And so I think it's worth defending, and running away won't save anything. It might save you a little bit of money for a while, but if you don't defeat it here in Washington or California or in these other places, eventually the dumb and bad ideas that you see all around you today, those will spread, and they're already popping up in Boise and Laramie and South Dakota. You're seeing it pop up in all these other states because bad, dumb, horrible ideas, they don't just stay in one place. If they're allowed to fester long enough, they spread like a disease, and pushing it back becomes much harder the more states that have been infected with it. If our past generations had been aware and not so clueless, they would have stopped this stuff long ago, but it's the challenge of our generation, and I think we're in a major fight to protect liberty and freedom today, and there's a lot going on. Let's go right here down to the first question that I see. This is Terry Gibson, 1193. And by the way, let me just show you what I'm looking at here, just so you kind of see. So these are the types of, this is what I see on my side with these questions. So you see there's a bunch of them that pop up. Do you see how much easier it is? I'm pointing right here, how much easier it is for me to see your question when you put the @ we the governed in it. So I'm just showing that as an illustration. I'm not judging, but just letting you know. So the question here is, will you do more videos on the cool family history aspects of Washington State to show how good people are worth fighting for? And I guess I kind of partially answered that question already, but absolutely, I do plan to do that. And listen, I don't even know necessarily what all the videos are going to be. I was very fortunate the way that I grew up here because whether it was, I had a bunch of uncles, I had a big family. So even if my dad wasn't taking me somewhere then, or my mom wasn't taking me camping somewhere, I traveled around the state a lot with a lot of my uncles as well. And I traveled with friends. Once I got a driver's license, I pretty much crisscrossed this state many times and I spent a lot of time in Eastern Washington because I had family up in Colville, and so I'd go out there in the summers. And once I had a driver's license, then I was pretty much unleashed on the state. And it's funny, I'm wearing the Unleashed T-shirt here, Unleash Wa. And I was a runner back then. You wouldn't know it looking at me now, but I was a pretty competitive, basically road runner. And so I do 5Ks and 10Ks or trail runs or whatever, all around the state of Washington. And so because of that, I was just seeing the state quite a bit. I also lived in Bellingham for a number of years when I came back from college. And so I feel personal attachments to a lot of places in Washington state, many friends all over the state, and it is well worth exploring it a little bit more. And I'm hoping that in doing these videos, I'm giving people a little bit more of a sense of why I care about the state and why I know it's worth saving and why pre-surrender and giving up and apathy is probably not the best choice or chance of fixing things as they are around here. Let's see. New studio setup. Okay, there's the next question. It's kind of a question here. This is Thunder Designer 303. This is a common commentator in the past. It's me, Thunder Striker. It's good to finally be able to be back in the live stream. How's everything? Catch me up, a new studio setup. Yeah, this is a setup here that we've had, that we've changed at the studio that has been generously donated to me for many years now. That I've been using the same place, and you really can't see around, but we changed the setup here a little bit as kind of a migration path towards having a studio that's a lot closer to home. This studio is actually about an hour and a half from my house right now. So when I come down and do the work, listen, I'm not complaining, because a free studio and having people here that can help me train me to get up to speed on how to do a lot of this stuff properly is very beneficial, especially if you don't have a lot of resources. So this has been a good way for me to get going, but I'm starting to reach the point where I need to have our own studio where we can actually have a little bit more control over the time, and I don't have to lose 400 hours a year driving. So that's my theory, and that's what we're working towards. But this is a slightly different setup here because it allows me to run this setup without any other assistance. So I'm here alone when I'm doing the filming like this. And also it allows me, actually, when I'm done with this live stream, I'm going to be recording my own videos. So that's why it kind of looks a little different right now. There's a lot of control and flexibility here. Some point in time, I'll probably just do a quick little, there's a second studio that I'm also going to be using here, and I might be converting to it while I'm still in this transition phase. I had somebody, a very generous person, donated some other speakers and some other odds and ends that I'm going to be able to use in the new studio when I finish getting it set up closer to home. And so I'm excited to kind of put some of that to work and hopefully just improve both the volume and the content that I'm putting out there. So anyway, and thanks for I see a bunch of positive comments about the traveling shorts. Yeah, and I will be continue to do this. I actually have a couple that I'm still learning how to edit those properly. So it's a little bit of a lack of skill set on my part. Jason Fisher, 1530, question. Glenn, hope you're awesome. What's your thoughts on Tacoma reversing the tenant protection initiative? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I saw that they were in the process of doing it. And one of the things about that initiative was there was a lot of shady push to get that initiative passed in the first place. And it was by some, kind of some socialist groups there that were pushing this I'm going to call it tenant protections initiative. It was really an attack on landlords more than anything else. And this combination of a lot of these regulations and rules makes it very, very difficult, I should say, to have the ability to rent, especially lower priced homes to anybody. And I say this as somebody who actually has rented before. I mean, I rented places to live when I was up in Bellingham. I've lived in places for free where I did remodeling in exchange for rent, and then when I was done, I had to move out. I rented places in May Valley, actually, back in the day. I rented a place out there for about a year, a whole property. It was right next to one of my uncle's properties. I've been near homeless at times, especially when I came out from college and I was trying to pay off my student loans as quick as I could, and I was nomadic, driving all over the state, camping out anyway. So I've been through that period of time as well. And the funny thing is I was traveling a lot, so and work had showers and a kitchen and stuff, so I was taking advantage of that. It was back before it was cool to do that. And then I've lived on family farms. My grandparents' farm. I lived in a little back house one time when I was doing a startup company for a couple of years. So I've been through the whole gamut. I know what it's like to have to pay rent, and it's not fun. And I understand people's frustration that they're paying rent, but at the same time, if you don't make that process an easy transactional sort of thing to have that with clear-cut rules on it, then what happens is you greatly constrain the amount of properties that are out there available for rent. And one of the problems that Tacoma is going to experience is that these policies that are pushed frequently by leftist organizations, they don't help anybody get more affordable housing. They may push more subsidized insider deal kickback schemes for subsidized housing, but no housing created by humanity is actually more expensive than subsidized housing. It's paid for by taxpayers, and they always overpay, deliver low quality, super expensive, and difficult to maintain, usually crappy housing, and it becomes some of the most expensive housing that people have ever put together. So you want to have privately run housing options out there, and enough of them that people have lower priced places they can rent. You don't want to make rules so difficult and so destructive on landlords that it's just cheaper for them to leave the house empty than it is to actually rent it to anybody, which is what the left tends to push. Let's see. Here's a question here, and this is by my Low Henderson 94087. Sorry, Glenn, do you think Governor Bob and AG Brown are throwing Secretary of State under the bus, and Secretary of State Hobbs, I'm assuming, under the bus concerning the Department of Justice voter registration data lawsuit? I don't think they're throwing him under the bus yet. They'll throw Hobbs under the bus in the future. That's their plan right now. So what they've done is they've set. Now listen, Hobbs is full. This is Secretary of State Hobbs' fault. So he decided that he was going to invent some kind of excuse for why he didn't want to be transparent on Washington State's voter rolls. Now, it's very obvious why the Democrats don't want Washington State to be transparent on this, mostly because it's going to reveal how screwed up and messed up the whole system is. I'm not sure the Department of Justice initial exposés on the illegals and non-U.S. citizens that are registered to vote is actually the biggest part of how bad it is, but that will be the first thing that they probably focus on and expose. And remember, all along, Ferguson is fully aware, he's completely aware of this, and Brown is certainly aware of it now, and Hobbs is probably aware. I say probably because he's the most disconnected from reality amongst those three people. And so he's easy to lead astray. He buys into their stories. And so because he's easy to lead astray, I believe that they've convinced him that A, the Department of Justice wasn't going to sue, or B, that they wouldn't prevail if they did sue. It looks like the Department of Justice is on very solid ground, at least since the 1960 Civil Rights Act, that says the feds have access and have the right to review voter rolls. And remember, that act was passed because of Democrats in the Reconstruction South, or the Jim Crow South by that time, had become masters at bloating the voter rolls and filling them with a lot of fake people, a lot of people who weren't real, and not taking them off when they died, and using that bloated voter roll as a way to manipulate election results when they needed to in order to suppress both Republican votes, which were obvious, but also the black vote at the time, which was also obvious because they were perceived as Republicans until about the late 60s. So for decades, almost a century, the Democrats have played all these games with voter rolls, and the feds, I've done some videos on this in the past, but the federal government actually did step in the 1880s. You had the Colfax riots and massacre, where the Democrats massacred a bunch of Republicans and freed slaves who were trying to get access to their ballots to see what the hell was going on. And that led to a horrific decision of the Supreme Court, which ultimately caused the weak-kneed Republicans back then to throw up their hands and give up on Reconstruction in the South for good. And you also saw the Republicans circle back around. In about the 1920s, they tried to do some voter reform. You saw them come back around in the early, and then you really saw them come back around in the 1950s with Eisenhower coming in, and there was some systematic effort made to start fixing the voting scams the Democrats are running in the Deep South. And so the Jim Crow South obstruction approach is the same, almost the same excuses, actually, that Steve Hobbs is using today. The Democrats appear to just be addicted to vote fraud, and so, or at least certainly encouraging it and providing the environment where it could flourish. And it's a little different now. It's not necessarily based on race anymore. But it is absolutely based on power, money, and control. And that's the issue, is that Hobbs came up with just some lame, really silly, and almost a kindergarten level sort of excuse for why he didn't want to provide or be transparent at all on the voter rolls in Washington state. And I've done plenty of videos on this. I don't want to reiterate everything I've already done. And in fact, I'm going to do another one tonight. I'll be recorded on this issue. But essentially, he'll be forced. Yeah, they'll go back and forth in some litigation and process, but it's really not that complex. And remember, Harmeet Dillon, when she filed that lawsuit today, filed it against 5 other states as well. Washington isn't the only one. It was Rhode Island, Maryland, a whole bunch of other states. So far, most of these states are all Democrat states with questionable, and they're sanctuary states, of course, so they're fluffing the voter rolls with non-U.S. citizens. Of course, they've been doing that for a long time. The Motor Voter Act of 1993 is also part of the problem, basically part of the problem here. And so now we're just running the situation. I think they have never liked Hobbs. It was never the Democrats' plan that Hobbs would actually survive the last election. They were planning to put a complete crazy person in there instead, who would go along with ranked choice voting and electronic voting and some of the other things that, if Hobbs was sitting here today, we would actually agree on. He's opposed to ranked choice voting and electronic voting, just like I am. And the Democrats are always looking for people who can't think for themselves and who will go along with the plan, whatever the universal plan is, and making voting worse has always been part of their plan. And so, but Hobbs also thinks that he can somehow thread the needle here, and by playing nice with basically Bob Ferguson and the Democrats and Nick Brown, he thinks that that's somehow going to buy him a lack of a Democrat challenger, which is just false. So they will definitely come after him this next year. And the Republicans may even be able to run a real candidate next year, or in several years if they want to as well. But remember, cleaning up the voter rolls is a big first step towards addressing a bunch of other issues in the state, as I've discussed before. But I do think Hobbs the internal machinations, I think, between them are real, and Hobbs will be the Democrats, the left at least, will work on removing Hobbs. Remember, he was the holdout vote frequently when he was in the state Senate. He had the unfortunate distinction of probably being the last Democrat left in the state Senate who believed math was real and not racist, and who actually believed in tangible things, that they were real, right? And that's very rare. You find very few Democrats believe that anymore today, none, at least not in that whole political office. And so that was why Inslee felt like, after Kim Wyman took the bribe from the Biden administration to bail out midterm, and therefore open the door that they could finally get a Democrat into the Secretary of State's office, which had been Republican going back many generations now. And that was the big scam behind the scenes. That was the big insider play. Democrats are very good at that, and you can always find Republicans willing to take the bribes. And that's what happened. And we'll see what he considers. B440, this is the question from you. Would you ever consider doing shorts about the different candidates that might be interesting to us while you drive around? Yeah, that's actually a good point. So there are some restrictions on shorts, and forgive me if you already know all this, but one of the challenges with shorts is that they have to be essentially 3 minutes or less. And that by itself isn't necessarily a challenge. It's just that they have to be 3 minutes or less. And the format and that you recorded in is typically a little different than this type of full length or this type of video setting. So the quality, actually, the video tends to be less. You're usually recording it on your phone, and the editing is a little bit more clunky as far as how you would do that. I'm fully aware there's people who do this and spend a lot of time doing it really well, but most of the time I'm going to be doing these shorts myself and doing the editing myself, and I have a skill set up to a point, and then it takes me a little while to get past that, so to improve even beyond that. But I am thinking candidates would be interesting. The hardest thing with candidate videos is the length of time. Usually you want to profile candidates a little bit better than just, hey, here's so-and-so, they're running in this position. Give them a little bit of information that way. But I'm willing to consider it. And you're right, I do meet candidates all over the state frequently, constantly, all the time. And if I'm able to do that next year, I may be trying to go around and do that. Let's see. I'm trying to get down to some questions. Let's see. Here's a comment anyway. Roddy Mom 525. That's an Rottweiler, it looks like. That's the name. I want to know why the Washington Health Plan Finder asked my husband if, I'm assuming he, wanted to be registered to vote, and she said, we don't ask for immigration status. Well, the reason why they tell you that is because they don't want to know. Because if they don't know, then they can pretend later on that they didn't realize that they had just registered a bus full of 72 people from Honduras to vote. That's essentially what's going on. Anyway, so we'll see what happens moving forward. So there are a lot of questions now, and I will do my best to keep up with them. Thunder Designer 303, what are your thoughts last month of the FAA canceling flights by 10% at 40 major U.S. airports during the government shutdown? Well, they were forced to do that because it was probably logical for them to do that for that limited window of time, just if for no other reason than because they were having problems with the air traffic controllers and the fact that the government was shut down and that they, for some reason, aren't considered critical parts of government that could be funded even during the shutdown battles. So we'll see. Anyway, somebody in there I see somebody here also saying that you're Finnish and my wife is part Finnish, so a lot of Finnish people actually came here and settled in Washington State. Let's see. Yep, there's somebody else. It's funny, I'm getting a lot of comments about those little short videos. One of the cool things about Washington State, and this is fairly unique to Washington, although you basically get the same, you can get the same sort of experience, I think, in Western Oregon too, but the ability to, and I've done this with exchange, or we had former exchange students who used to stay with me when I was younger and from Germany, and they would come out and visit later when they're older. And I remember one of these exchange students that one day we went down and we spent the day going out to Ocean Shores, flying kites, hanging out with the kids, and came home. And then the next day we were up in Mount Rainier on the snow, playing in the snow. And it was kind of funny, the extreme contrast you could get in one place. Now, if you're really smooth about that, you can do both in the same day, which was always fun. If you organize like a fun trip with kids, like we're going to see the ocean and the mountain in the same day, you could do that. A bit of driving in between, but it was still fun to do stuff like that. And growing up in Washington, that was always kind of a dynamic that I remember, even from the time I was really little, going out to either Long Beach or Ocean Shores and having adventures out there, and then literally the next day being up driving in the snow caves. When they would plow, it felt like caves to me when I was a kid. And you go up to Mount Rainier, and you had just these ice walls, on both sides of the road that you're driving in. It always seemed pretty cool. Let's see. Let me go to the top here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Let's see. Here's it's T8858X. The question is, Glenn, when do they arrest the criminals in Washington state government? Well, the question is who they are. I have a high level of skepticism that the concept of justice and the way that many people probably watching this video, how you would view that, and that when people do bad things in government, I find it very unlikely that they get arrested in most cases. The exceptions will be if they're caught red-handed stealing money and they're dumb enough to make it so obvious that that's what they were doing, sometimes they'll go to jail, sometimes. Or if they maybe if they openly, rape a kid or do something like that, maybe they would do something, or if they voted for Trump. But short of that, I can't see anybody being arrested in government for the most part. Now, I can see them losing their job. I can see their political career going away. I can see a lot of things happening to them that in their world they'd view as pretty significant outcomes. I will take what I can get. Public exposure is the first step. I am stunned and amazed at how many people actually are too lazy or incompetent or unwilling to actually go far enough down at the public exposure part, which is the first step you have to go through in any of this stuff, and they think that's too much work, and yet somehow they think there's going to be a magical solution where people will be arrested and go to jail for doing bad things. That absolutely never happens unless there's public exposure. You've got to have the public exposure, and frankly, there's enough whistleblowers, there's enough using the Public Records Act, there's all kinds of the tools we have to go and expose how corrupt and bad government is. Part of the reason why I'm doing the Doge Washington training. You have no idea what's going to end up being uncovered over time as we look into the budgets. Now, does that mean a whole bunch of people get arrested and go to jail? I don't know. A lot of people will probably lose their jobs. Contracts will probably disappear. You may see nonprofit entities vanish into the mist of time as they try to flee and hide, what they've done. But outcomes like that are still acceptable in the road of trying to fix what's broken. It's not perfect. It's not exactly what I want either. But I do know if we sit back and do nothing, that it only gets worse. And in fact, the fact that we've allowed it to fester as long as it has and grown as bad as it has here ensures and almost guarantees that every single red state in America is going to be fighting this off, and they don't even know what they're dealing with already. I've already been, I've visited places, like I said, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Texas, and Florida, places that they should know better. Florida seems to know a little bit better because, remember, they were a state that was going very blue for a while, and they've shifted back. And so I think that experience in Florida has made them a little bit more intense in the fight, and with some of the political leadership they've had, they've been more focused on it. But there's a lot of shockingly lazy Republicans in the political class in those states that say they're red, and they are the way they're voting, and their sloppy laziness is an apathy is the reason why they're going to lose the fight when the left gets focused in those states, because they're not paying attention to the type of fight we're having in states like this, in Washington or in Oregon or in Colorado, other places where it's a much more difficult, Arizona, Pennsylvania, places like that where we really do have to make a big difference. And we'll see how it goes. Next question, Sudello, or sorry, Sduell, Sudell, 60. We the Governed. How do we start the? By the way, if you do at We the Governed, I think that's the mistake. If you do at We the Governed in one word, that's what makes it brighter and a little bit easier for me to see. How do we start the process to repeal mail-in voting? Well, good question. The easiest way to repeal mail-in voting is actually to have the legislature just say that they don't want it anymore. That's a very clear and obvious path. If they went down that road, they have the right to do that January, right in the middle of January. They could pass a law that does it. Now, obviously, you'd have to have the governor sign it. But we have a majority of Democrats who love mail-in voting, and some Republicans that are stupid enough to still like it too. And then the governor, of course, knows that that's a key to the castle, so he's not going to support it. However, that would be the easiest path. You just simply elect new people. Now, the problem, of course, there is that if mail-in voting creates a lot of problems in the election process, making it more challenging to get good people into government, then the likelihood of replacing some of those bad people is reduced. That's the argument that's oftentimes made. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who make that argument also then decide that somehow it's a genius move to just not vote at all, and somehow that the rest of us who are actually trying to pick up those seats, move ahead in some ways, it makes it easier for us, and it does not. Now, mail-in voting has a big risk to it, at least the way we're doing it in our state, that may have nothing to do with what's going on in our state. It may have to do more with the Supreme Court case coming out of, I want to say it was Mississippi, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear it. Oral argument's going to be in a few months. The decision will be this June, which is enough time to be implemented for the midterm elections. And that is, and this has a big impact on our state, that they're making a decision on whether it's legal to count ballots for forever, basically, after election night. So do we have election day? And what is the definition of election day? Does that mean that election day is election 2 months, like what we have in Washington? A month before election and a month after election, or and it came out of a situation there where elections in those states that hadn't gone as far down the rabbit hole as Washington did, and they would get late ballots coming in, and they were still trying to count them, of course, after the fact, and it changes outcome in elections. So you think one person won on election night, and then somebody else totally different ends up winning down the road 3 weeks later when they find the last secret sauce stash of ballots. And if they cut off that part of election just simply from that Supreme Court case, if nothing else, and they say election day actually means one day and that it has to be decided that day. And so it doesn't eliminate mail-in voting, but it sure as heck changes dramatically how we do it in our state. It means that every ballot would have to be received by election day. Now remember, last I checked, it was about almost half the voters. I think I'm right on this. I think it's about half the voters now in Washington State don't trust the post office at all, and they go down and hand deliver their ballots to a drop box, or usually it's a drop box somewhere, or even they'll still call it a drop box even if it's at the auditor's office, but they'll take that extra step to make sure their ballot gets in there because everybody realizes that the post office is falling apart. They've had bad experiences with mail not being delivered or things going astray in the mail, and they realize if it happens there, it's going to happen with our ballots too. And so people have shifted quite a bit. It's been a big change in the voting system, even in our state. Well, imagine now if they are not allowed to count any ballots after election night. Now that means that a lot of the games that are currently played by ballot harvesting operations, by left-wing dark money groups, suddenly all those game plans get thrown out and they're no longer valid. Now you're going to have to suddenly run it differently. It does not eliminate mail-in voting, but it's probably the beginning of the death knell of mail-in voting the way that we see it today in our state. So that's the other thing that could come out of this. Now you also have the ability of Congress to be able to pass a law to make it illegal, and I do believe they could, for the very same reason that they could pass the 1960 Civil Rights Act that allowed and demanded that the feds have access to your voting rolls. They can also pass, just like they did in 1993, saying, and this was a dumb move and a reversal, of course, on elections, but when they did a vote by mail, or letting you register when you go get your driver's license. So that program was a problem. So registering at the DMV, that's obviously become an issue, but the feds did pass that, and it was signed into law back in 1993. But you also have HAVA. You have some of these other laws that have been passed then by the feds, and it wasn't controversial that could be done. It is now, because everything related to Trump, of course, is Trump derangement syndrome for the left, and everything's a fight. But if there's enough fraud exposed, enough non-U.S. citizens exposed, I do think that it's very possible that you could see some shifts and changes from both either the federal level, but also, and then I think that would start to change outcomes in some of these elections. So we'll see how it goes. Let's see. Here's a question here. Jason Fisher, 1530. And there are a lot of questions coming up here, guys, so I'm going to try to move that up. Question, what's your thoughts on expansion of light rail to Tacoma? Is light rail expansion a good investment or just good money chasing bad? Actually, there is almost no way that we've ever found in Washington State that you can waste taxpayer dollars more on something less useful than light rail. It's one of the biggest examples of malinvestment of public dollars that's ever occurred in state history. In fact, I can't even think of anything that's even remotely close to the same quantity or size of tax dollars wasted for what has become, at best, transportation for the 1%. And there's no sane group of people that would ever actually think that it's a good idea when you look at the return on how much money for what you get, right? And California, obviously, with the bullet train to nowhere, demonstrated like a true level of multi-billions of dollars wasted in complete disaster that never went anywhere. But in Washington, light rail got started before the bullet train down there, and we just squander billions and billions of dollars pointlessly on a very marginal, antiquated sort of transportation concept. that really could be replaced by almost anything else that you can come up with in a much cheaper and more effective way. And that diversion of money into this disaster has essentially starved legitimate transportation projects like fixing some of the bridges and making them bigger and maintain them better in Washington state, like expanding some of the highways so that you have less traffic congestion. Remember, the Department of Transportation a number of years ago removed traffic congestion as one of their priorities, which it had always been for the previous 60, 70 years. And then suddenly taking that away, when congestion is no longer a priority, then it allows you to justify squandering and malinvesting the taxpayer dollars into stupid albatross projects like the light rail system. And so the other ancillary benefit you get with light rail is that it becomes simply a place for fentanyl users and meth heads to shoot up and get high with a view, and it allows them to go into new neighborhoods that they wouldn't. They'd be too incompetent because they are too incapacitated, don't have enough money because they're drug addicts to actually have vehicles that they can drive or steal, maybe. So riding light rail allows the even more dumb and incompetent level of criminal class to get further out into other communities and spread their crime wave a little bit wider. And because of that, what happens though is that people don't want to ride light rail either, because that's who you're riding with sometimes. And I'm fully aware of how convenient it is to use light rail sometimes to go into Seattle to go to a game or do something like that. I've got relatives that have used it a few times, but most of the time they don't want to have anything to do with it. And for the money we put into it, for a couple people to have convenient commuting trips, it is not worth that investment. Anything else you spent money on, buses, anything, expanding the freeways, anything would be a better use of the money than how they are right now. So if I was Tacoma, I would not want that to happen. And but we'll see. Again, we don't have smart people in government. We have very corrupt people in government, so bad choices is the usual default setting that we get at this point in time. TZ Burton, this week, Seattle reps are pushing Olympia to pass a legislation to require the rest of the state to fund illegal immigration for Seattle. Yep. I see it passing. Is this going to be a new tax? I don't know, and I'll tell you why, because there's a couple things that are coming together and clashing on this issue directly right now. Part of it has nothing to do with Washington, and you have to remember, I think, that in this big fight, especially over immigration, Washington state's like the mini-me to California and to some of these other states right now. Minnesota, bloated disasters, major exposure, really. I'm almost kind of surprised at how public the exposure finally became when every one of us knew this was what was going on. But with the fraud that was been exposed, driven almost exclusively by non-U.S. citizens, illegal aliens, in that case it was mostly Somalis that came in, and the more the excuses you see the government there trying to come through, when you have 400 state workers come forward and say that the governor was directly responsible for that fraud at the time, and you've seen similar patterns, maybe less less massive than Minnesota, but you've seen some of that here in Washington as well, then you realize that the feds are approaching a point where they can easily cut Washington state off of almost everything, and I think they can legally do so. Yes, it'll be held up in court with a couple of corrupt federal judges, but I think eventually you get to the point where these dollars are getting cut off. Washington state can't run these programs without federal dollars. I don't know that people are quite as aware of what that means. If you look at the EBT card system, for example, it is 100% federally funded. Every single dime that goes out in that program is federally funded. Now, the administrative costs are only 50% funded by the feds. So you could argue that that the state might be able to pick up a higher level of administrative costs, but the state budget isn't big enough to handle the actual distribution of free cash for food. So I can't see how the state would run that program very long. Maybe they could do it for a year, but then they're out of money totally, and there isn't enough money to fund it, especially when you compound that with AppleCare/Medicaid. And that program as well is filled with fraud. And so as the state refuses to reveal the non-U.S. citizens who are getting this and other types of subsidies, where federal money is coming into HUD small business loans, the COVID cash fiascos, all this other stuff. The feds are moving forward now. The battles in other states were just a small little satellite of those fights. But as they go to cut off this federal funding, Washington State will be one of the target lists because we're just as clownish as California or Colorado. And so, and when you see those cutoffs, I don't see how our state survives that. So, yes, they remember some of the bills that are proposed right now, especially this one. I saw the one, I think it might be the one, TZ, that you're referencing here. There was a dumb bill that was proposed by Sean, is it Scott, the representative from downtown Seattle. It's dead on arrival. I mean, it's never going to go anywhere. It's a virtue signaling bill that he's doing so that the leftists feel like he's one of them. He knows it's not going anywhere. Everyone knows it's not going anywhere. Do the Democrats have the majority of votes so they could pass anything they wanted? Mostly yes, but remember, there's an election right now coming up this next year. And historically, as I've addressed before, short sessions right before election time are not the sessions where Democrats have historically ever, or anybody really, Republicans or Democrats, that's not when they pass radical legislation of any kind. And the reason for that, they propose virtue signaling bills they don't expect to go anywhere. They do that sometimes, but they don't tend to get anything done during that session, partially because it's shorter, partially because they need to get out of Dodge and start being able to run their campaigns. And if there's one thing that a politician cares about more than anything else, it's getting reelected. And as this is particularly true for Democrats. In fact, for them, there's no calling higher than life. So they will absolutely do anything to make sure that they're getting elected again. And giving your opposition or giving your party problems isn't the path that they're going to be able to go down to guarantee an easy reelection in their mind. And remember, they can't raise money when they're in session. So to extend the session longer, which the governor could do, is not something they want to do either, because they can't campaign. They're frozen out of campaigns, they're frozen out of fundraising. So neither of those are scenarios they want to deal with. But we'll see how it goes. Let's see. This is Carrie something. Ethets me NS3RJ. Anyway, hello. At We the Governed. And here's the reason why you made it in all caps and put spaces there. If you put it together, it will not do that. But is there a way to know how much in tax dollars are being spent on illegals? Not really. I mean, not comprehensively where you could be totally sure. Do we have 10% of our budget being spent on illegals in Washington State? That's probably pretty reasonable. I think that could be as much as 10% collectively. Now, here's what you'd have to look at: DSHS expenses, mostly it's EBT and Medicaid, most likely. Maybe a little bit of Medicare, but probably mostly Medicaid. And then you're also going to be looking at public school system. So OSPI, the state reimburses schools for the number of students who attend those schools, regardless of the students' immigration status, right? They very specifically didn't want to include that because if you remove them from the head count repayment from the state, then the schools would lose a lot of money, the state would save a lot of money, and of course that's not what the schools want. So you're going to lose. There's a bunch that you're going to be spending money there. HUD spends a lot of their money on illegals as well. Doesn't matter what the law says. I know they're violating it. That's all they do here in our state. A lot of the nonprofit money, which originates as grants from local government or state government or even federal government, it gets passed through. A large percentage of that is also going into programs that clearly fund illegals. So I can't see how it's much less than 10%. Maybe it's more, maybe it's closer to 15%, maybe it's 8%, but it's somewhere in that budget, and that's billions of dollars in our state. It's a lot of money. Let's see. Jack Palder, 1522. How would you rate Marie Gluesenkamp to Herrera Butler? Oh, as a difference. Well, I mean, listen, I would have probably preferred Herrera Butler to be in there over Gluesenkamp for most, if I was just to purely look at this from a policy standpoint. But Herrera Butler lost. Marie Gluesenkamp, we got all these hyphenated people coming in here, but so Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is in there now as the congresswoman, and I'm in that district too, very far north. I actually think she has been relatively wise in how she has run her office there. And I'll tell you, because partisan focus tends to be people's attitude. Oh, they're Democrat, I hate them. Republican, I love them. Or maybe only one flavor Republican I like, and everyone else is going to hell in a handbasket. But regardless of whatever your perspective is on this, that the 3rd Congressional District, which is where I live, and I know that's where you live as well, Jack, that is a conservative +4 district, right? +5 district, depending on how you look at it. Republican +4, I think is what they classify it as. Now, what that means is that a Republican, all things being equal, Republican and Democrat running against each other, a Republican would have an advantage. And it's one of the few congressional districts with that kind of polling data that Trump won, that a Democrat holds that seat. So it's inevitably going to be a major battle seat. And by the way, it's become more conservative over the last 15 years than it used to be. All metrics, to deny this is to deny reality. However, what that means is if you're a Democrat, in her case, who got elected, who didn't really come from the aggressive left-wing side of their party, and she was considered an outlier when she ran originally and won. Part of the reason why she won is because Republicans, true to form, are super awesome at being self-destructive and fighting amongst themselves as their highest priority in life. And that level of stupidity ensured that Joe Kent lost the first time, because I think that was probably his best shot. The second time around, some of that bad attitude still carried over into it, and Joe Kent lost again. But I will tell you, the second time, Marie Gluesenkamp ran a much better political campaign. The Democrats, if you talk to them in that district or go to some of her town halls, which I'd recommend Republicans doing sometime, look at the abuse that she takes from Democrats who go to those town halls. It's pretty crazy. If you look at her voting record, she generally is aligned with Democrats almost all the time. However, there's certain strategic votes that she takes to make the news that she isn't in line with Democrats. And usually those votes wisely line up with trying to be able to walk this middle road kind of position where she's a Democrat clearly, but she's not the full-blown crazy Democrat, right? She has to portray herself as not in the crazy camp. And the Democrat Party in D.C. is shifting more into crazy camp mode, which is going to alienate any of their more conservative, or at least I'm going to put that in air quotes, conservative sort of voting people. Now, their base is still very left-leaning, the people who at least show up for the town halls or involved in the political movement. The wise thing that Marie Gluesenkamp has done, in my opinion, has more to do with outreach into the community, and it's one of the things that a Republican taking her on is going to have to run a very aggressive campaign to outreach directly to the community. And it's not going to be your consultant-led idiotic ad campaign that nobody cares about. It's going to actually be boots on the ground, people out there going to every Grange meeting, every PTA meeting, every homeowner association meeting, every Farm Bureau meeting, every Eagle Scout Court of Honor meeting, every little event in the community. And you're talking from southern Thurston County to Wahkiakum and Pacific and Grace Harbor, this whole area. It's a big area, and Republicans are bad at that. They're just terrible at it. Mainly because when it comes to run a political campaign, the consultants don't get any financial remuneration for running a good ground game and community outreach plan, and because Republicans usually are so bad at, they let their campaigns essentially be run by consultants. And you can't find anybody worse at understanding what community outreach really means. They always tell you they do, but they literally have no idea. And so when I'm looking at Marie Gluesenkamp, she's done a highly effective job at this community outreach. And if Republicans don't understand that, and understand that if they don't counter it, they are not going to beat her in this race, then it won't matter how much money a Republican has running against her. They'll still lose, because you can only defeat that if you have an excellent community outreach program yourself. That's hard to do. So I'm not really talking about how she's voting or other things. I'm really just talking about the raw mechanics that a lot of people who log onto this show and ask me questions are wondering about. And in this case, I think that Republicans take a lot of stuff for granted, and you may be very passionate about making sure you get elected Republican, but there's a large enough percentage of every population in every district that really doesn't care that much about party affiliations. They only think about politics for a small percentage of time, and they go back to living their lives. And to get those people to come to your side, they better know you. They better have seen you, heard you, know that you care about some of the issues they care about. Marie Glusenkamp has a pretty good team that's making that level of inroad there. Even if she gets screamed at and yelled at by a bunch of leftists at those town halls, I don't even think that hurts her. I think that actually probably helps. TZ Burton, question here. Tomorrow starts the committee sessions. Yes, it does. Budget and spending are top priority without program cuts. Will Democrats be successful in spending more even though we are in budget deficit? I don't think they're going to spend more. You're right about them essentially approaching the committee session meetings in the beginning. And remember, this is like just the negotiations. You have a 60-day session, and they're going to wait till the very last minute before they're going to admit whatever their budget's going to come out at. And I actually think they're going to try to raid the rainy day fund as their compromise before they leave Olympia. That's what I think they'll do, because Washington State has wisely set aside a rainy day fund, and they're going to raid it because that's the lowest political cost that you can get without setting yourself up for political attack by the other side. Who's going to really defend the rainy day fund? Republicans and opponents to Democrats would, of course, bring that up, but it doesn't have the same resonance and by the way, they decided to raise taxes as well on top of you this time. So the shortfall, I think my opinion is they raid the rainy day fund. Maybe they'll cut some programs here and there, but remember, there's so much bloat and waste in Washington State government. It's not actually hard to cut Washington State government at the bloat that it's at now without people even frankly noticing, for the most part. Sure, some insiders won't get the same cut of grift that they would normally get, but it isn't that difficult to go in and do it. And if they don't know how to do it, I can come in and do it for them, which I'd be happy to do. Let's see right here. Thunder Designer 303. Did the Florida governor's race show James Flashback leading the GOP primary over Brian Donalds, or is he currently leading? To be honest, I have no idea. I cannot answer that question because I have not tracked that level of detail in Florida. Jason Fisher, 1530. Question, what's your thoughts on if it's worth buying a fixed magazine DS15? I don't want to put wear and tear on my pre-ban items, but unsure of future legality of Washington pulling rug out. I have not looked at those firearms that much. I would be interested in trying one of those just to see how well they work. It reminds me of the old style... there was another pre-ban back in the early 90s. There were some rifles that were built this way. Now I can't remember what they were, and they weren't expensive because they're more awkward to use, right? But some people would do that. I don't know. I would probably not spend too much money on a fixed magazine unless you're just going out and practicing for some reason. So your pre-ban items, I mean, really, how much wear and tear do you have on them? Unless you're shooting. Back when I was doing competitive shooting, I remember I would go out and train. I could see shooting 300 rounds a night for maybe 3 or 4 nights a week. That adds up. It's a lot of ammo, a lot of 45 caliber ammo at the time. I do remember that, buying the big pallets of ammo. But most people probably don't do that, and it's pretty expensive. It's a lot more expensive now than it was for me back then. Let's see. Here's a comment somebody made here, which I thought was interesting. I'm going to, even though it's not a question, let's see. My loser niece was just told by the Washington State Social Services Office to not work so she can get more money from them. She has allowed her daughter to become a fraud loser, and they both are on the take. Yeah. Well, and here's the reason why I read your comment, even though it's not a question. I have had family members experience extreme poverty before, and they work hard to get out of it. And when they were hitting that point where their income was going to go up high enough that their benefits were going to get cut, exactly the same thing that you see here is what happened to them 20 some odd years ago, where the DSHS employees would go in and say, listen, you don't want to take that raise. That pay raise is going to, we're going to have to cut your benefits. And then financially it doesn't make sense. And there's some truth to that, actually. They're not lying about that truth with the cliff cutoff benefits in some cases. But I remember this particular relative of mine saying, listen, my goal is not to stay on your stupid program for the rest of my life. My goal is to get off your program. And I've been on it for a little while and I want to get off, and I'm earning enough money and I'm doing well enough at work that it looks like I'm going to get a pay raise and I'm getting off this stupid program. But that isn't how it's sold to people, and it is ridiculous. And anyway, that's what I see going out there quite a bit. Let's see. I'm going to keep going. I'm looking for a question here. Here it is. Christopher Suzuko, 1351. By the way, I'm not skipping anybody's question, so if I'm missing something there, it means I just plain missed it. Thoughts on House Bill 1163. It's hard to stay and save a place when I feel like I'm being treated like a child and my money's being taken, especially with a right that I care about. I don't know what that bill is. I don't have the bills numbered. So if you bring up a House bill number, explain to me what the bill is. I probably have dealt with it, but I don't have them all memorized by number. Jason Fisher, 1530. Question, I don't live in Seattle area, but is it still worthwhile to watch their news channels? From what I see, a lot of crime, even compared to Portland. Yeah, I would pay attention to what's going on all around you and crime, because remember, the criminals don't stay. It's not like they come up to the border of their city or the county and say, oh, I don't want to cross over there. I might, I only commit crimes in the city of Kent, right? That's not really how it works. So they don't care. They're looking for crimes of opportunity, and they're going to go wherever they think they can get away with something. So I would pay attention to it. Portland looks like it has a lot worse crime to me right now, even than Seattle, but who knows? And when we're talking about two self-destructive cities that are in some kind of a competition so you can spiral into the ground first. So it's very difficult to necessarily compare. Now remember, Seattle has a bigger concentration, it's a bigger population, and so you're going to probably hear more about some of the stories up there. But as a percentage of the population, I don't think it's as bad actually as Portland. But I would definitely be paying attention to it. There's a big benefit our state's getting right now. People are not so aware of this, but the ICE emphasis and the federal shift in going after organized crime, especially drug cartel operations, and genuinely doing mass arrests and really shutting that down in a way that they haven't for many, many years now. You didn't see them even doing that during the first Trump administration. You sure as heck didn't see it during Obama at all. And the Biden administration was a free-for-all for criminals. So to see this shift right now, inevitably that should translate, just because you're pulling all these illegals off the streets that are cartel people. They're tied into the distribution of large volumes of drugs and weapons and all kinds of stuff. Pulling those guys off the street is going to translate into a lower crime rate. And you're probably going to also shift into more the volume of crime you have left with the people that are there when the cartels aren't actively involved tends to be more dumb, stupid crime by entry-level clowns that just need time in jail. Let's see. What do you think? I'm going to jump down here. B440. What do you think about State Senator Shoemake, which is in the legislative 42nd district, stepping down from the Senate? By the way, that's the 42nd district is up in Whatcom County. That's northern Whatcom County. I actually didn't know for sure that she was stepping down, but if she is stepping down, that's an opportunity. If I was the Republicans up there, I would get serious about running a campaign. And if I was the Republicans in Bellingham and Whatcom County, I would get over myself and stop fighting with each other as your highest priority in life and find somebody that has a good chance of prevailing. That's actually a pretty conservative district. And especially with some of the things that are going on with crime and taxes, you have an opportunity up there to elect a good Republican in that district. But you will have to be on the same page. If you're just going to fight each other over who gets the candy at the Lincoln Day dinner, then then it's very difficult to prevail in that case. It does take a lot of work to win these races. Thunder Designer 303, who do you think will win the Tennessee election? Well, in theory, and I mean, you're talking about one of the special elections, one of the few that are going on right now, the Republicans should win in the sense that district is more Republican-oriented, but, who knows? We'll have to see. Special elections are the time when all the Trump voters seem to forget that Trump can't do anything unless he has Congress on his side, and so they don't bother to go out and vote for the very people that he needs to help him to get his agenda across the finish line. So a shocking amount of Republicans just don't even bother to show up, whereas the left always shows up. It's their religion, it's their dedication, they're going to be there, and even in a relatively what would normally be a safe district like that, you want to get out there and help if they need to go. Jason Fisher, 1530, do you think Microsoft will leave the state? No, they won't leave the state, but I'll tell you what they will do is they'll shift most of their they'll stop hiring anybody new in the state, for sure. They'll start downsizing and shifting departments outside of the state, for sure. That, I think, is going to happen. I think the Democrats have already been dumb enough that they've inspired Microsoft to go down this road already, just like they did the same thing to Boeing years ago, if you had paid any attention to Boeing in the 80s and 90s. So I would anticipate that that's what Microsoft does. Unlike Boeing, Microsoft is actually able to move even easier and faster if they want to. Same thing with Amazon. So if the Democrats want to be dumb and to lose whatever, and the funny thing is that they're going to lose their voter base in this too. The greatest strength that the Democrats have in Washington state is the high-income voter group. That is because that's who funds their election campaigns. That's who basically helps them get across the finish line. Those are the worst neighborhoods to doorbell. Listen, I would take doorbelling an apartment complex in any place in Washington way over trying to doorbell a high net worth neighborhood in Redmond any day. It'd be way more productive. Because the people in those apartments, I have always found them to be much more attached to reality than the clown show weirdos that tend to be thinking that it's like they got some kind of a virtue signaling approach to being guilty about being successful. And so they're going to vote for Democrats even when they know it's self-destructive and insane, only because they prefer the virtue signaling with their wine and cheese club friends at the book reading more than anything else. And so I would much rather doorbell and try to work on winning people from apartment complexes. By the way, that's not how Republicans think, which stuns me. TZ Burton, AG's office has paid out $502 million in lawsuits and has a $2.5 billion pending litigation, mostly from 2018 child care. This is a really good point here. COVID and others, yep. We're self-insured in our state, that's true. Will higher taxes be needed to pay for these suits? No, not that I've seen right now. Most of those are sort of not the 2.5 billion pending, but the 502 million that has been built into the budget already. The one thing to remember is, yes, we're self-insured, but there are reinsurance policies, I believe, that Washington has that they draw from in some of these settings, and they're rarely going to actually base their budget on those lawsuits so much. If there was a obvious reason for them to raid the rainy day fund, I think some of these litigations could lead to it. What they don't ever seem to be willing to do is go back and reform the stupidity and incompetence and corruption inside the bureaucracy that led to these settlements in the first place. And that's a question I would be asking the Democrats every single day if I was in Olympia. John Jacobson, 5550. Beautiful Washington State is still hidden in the midst of bad human behavior. Sad. Yes, it is. And that is why I'm trying to still get those videos out there. I'm glad you guys like them, and I will be doing more. So let's see. Watermelon shrub. I don't know if you meant shug or slug or shrug, because it could go either way. Maybe this has already been asked previously, but thoughts on Scott Pressler? Listen, I love the fact that he was out here in Washington State. I loved him doing the work to help promote the initiatives. I think that was very important. One thing to remember about Pressler's success mainly in Pennsylvania, more than anything else, is that you have to register to vote there in those states where that's like a high priority. And I realize that we also in our state do have a lot of people. It's less about people not being registered to vote in Washington than it is about people who are registered to vote just not bothering to vote. You can't help you get registered to vote against your will and by accident in Washington State. Every time you go and visit the Department of Licensing, you get registered to vote, whether you want to be or not. Every time you visit DSHS, you get registered to vote, whether you want to be or not. You get inundated with questions and demanding that you vote. Oftentimes you get registered to vote multiple times. So I don't know what he could do to get more people registered to vote than are already registered to vote here. And that was a big part of the dynamic that he demonstrated as kind of this high energy guy pushing to get more people registered to vote. But I'd like anybody with a following and who's generated national interest to come to Washington. Listen, we're Backwater USA as far as DC is concerned, as far as the RNC is concerned, certainly as far as the big bureaucrats in, wherever they are. They don't focus on our state. We're usually in, like I said, a backwater of America. And to me, it's the center of the universe, probably to many of you watching this. So we care about it. But it's one of those things that it would be nice to fix and change so that we can make more progress moving forward. Listen, I've got a lot of questions. I'm going to try to get to these, at least the ones I can see right now before we close out tonight's live stream. Glenn, curious question. Why are there so many Tesla Cybertrucks around the U.S.? The shape of the vehicle looks weird because people like it. And I've talked to people who drive that truck. They actually do like it. So that's what people do. Let's see. Is that why they don't? Here's another question. Watermelon Chug. Is that why they don't paint the lines on the road? That I don't know about. But you might be referring to some of the auto driving features with some of the Tesla trucks. Sorry, I don't have an answer for that question. Don't even really know the context of it. Thunder Designer 303. Hey, Glenn, wasn't there originally a question box down below the screen so that way we knew what question you're reading? Yeah, that was originally there was right here you'd be able to see the question that I'm actually looking at when I'm answering it. Right now, this is what I'm seeing, and these are the questions that I'm getting to right here. In fact, I can move this up. And you'll see, there's a lot more that I probably can't get to all of them. But, and that had more to do with the change in the studio. I am hoping to get back to that with the live stream so that you'll see the questions in here because I do think that is a really good feature and I do want to get to that. But that's beyond what I can do myself, and some people are helping me, and I do think I'll be set up on that before too long. Kathleen 253, when are they going to fix the fishing wars bridge between Tacoma and Fife? Good question. I think that's the one that they have under construction right now, if I remember right. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that has come up before. I think that they're planning to work on it. Let's see. Let's go. Graphics Guru 2879. Glenn, do you think Trump will strike Venezuela? I do at this point in time. I didn't before, but I do now. And I'm going to tell you that I have a couple of maybe odd opinions about that at this point in time. But number one, Venezuela may be far more involved in the drug trade in America than I had actually thought about before, because it did create itself as a haven for narco traffickers, and probably as much as the socialists have destroyed the country, which is all they ever do, it probably would appear to be a fairly safe place to operate if you paid off the right people. And so moving like Mexican drug cartel operations down there or other types of elements of the drug trade probably did become a bigger part of who Venezuela was. Plus you have the large gold deposits, large oil deposits there that are clearly being wasted and unutilized by the existing socialists because they can never run any kind of operation efficiently in any effective way. And so I see that as being more of an incentive to turn that country to at least eliminate a festering sore in the Western Hemisphere than I did before, in the sense that Trump seems to be serious. I mean, the number of assets, military assets that are staged in that area, would not surprise me at all if it was struck. In fact, if I was betting on it, I would say you'd want to bet that they will probably hit it. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means they just take out all the cartel operations there and maybe, some elements of the government there if they try to push back. I don't know if it means full regime change, which is something you actually can do compared to doing it in the Middle East. I don't know if there's some kind of plan that's more mercantilist in setting up an easy access to large oil and natural resources that are closer to America than trying to get them from anywhere else. I don't know, but I think it's actually going to happen. I'm kind of surprised. Let's see. Oh, okay. B. York, 1983. HB 1163 is a firearms license permit to purchase that Liz Berry has forced upon us. Actually, I don't think that's going anywhere. So remember, that died last time. So it may still technically be alive, but I don't think that bill looks like it's going anywhere right now. And this is particularly true with a couple of the other Supreme Court cases that are going on right now. I don't see that actually happening at this point in time. Sidel 60, did HB 5077, automatic voter registration for any interaction with Washington state agencies and NGOs pass? Yes, it did. And that's part of the reason why we have all kinds of garbage in the voter rolls, which is part of the reason why the Department of Justice is suing Washington state officially as of today. And I think another 14 states total, but we're certainly on that list. Here's Lindsay 7543. I'm planning on attending a rally in January, asking the legislatures to fix the Keeping Families Together Act. Do you think lawmakers will fix it this year? I don't know. Good question. It's good to do those things down there, by the way, and keep reminding them about that. I don't know if they'll fix it. The Democrats are probably more concerned about all their friends losing the grifting operations that they were planning on giving them, and they probably promised them, and they can't give them now. And so that's probably more of their stress than anything else. Here's a question from Jason Fisher, 1530. Question, do you think there are any Washington politicians who don't live in Washington state? Oh, that's a good question. I am not aware of any right now. I have looked into this a few times in the past. I've definitely found some that didn't live in district. I've definitely found some that didn't live in the cities that they claim they were. You had that Everett case recently where they bounced that guy out. It's not alone. But I'm not aware of any right now. Now, the arguments oftentimes do come up when it has to do with congressmen who have a home in D.C. and, of course, the mortgage fraud scandals that have popped up in a lot of different people's radars now more. Do they really live in D.C. or do they live in the district? And that's always been a question sometimes. So you might have some cases like that. I haven't looked into some of them very, very carefully. Here's probably, at this point in time, this will be the last question I think I asked for the answer or attempt to answer for the night. No guarantees I can ever answer anything well. This is by Graphics Guru 2879. We the Governed. Glenn, G-O-V-E-R-N-E-D. By the way, that one should have worked, so I don't know why it didn't light up. Glenn, have we already lost the immigration battle? No, not at all. I mean, listen, if you're paying attention to what's going on here, obviously, the feds were entirely insane and out of control, and they've been that way for a long time. This is the first time that the immigration battle has been fought in your lifetime. I mean, you can make some arguments that Reagan thought he was solving it with his amnesty disaster of the 80s, and it was kind of a disaster at the time. He admitted later that he thought that was one of his bigger mistakes that he made in public office because he was lied to, and what they promised to fix, they never fixed. This actually looks to me like it's the first time since any of us have ever been alive that there's actually some serious effort to address this problem in a much more comprehensive and thorough way. And listen, removing 2.5 million people from the country, which appears to have happened over the last 10 months now, that is not nothing. That is something. And the ramp up that I see going on and their willingness to continue pushing hard looks like that there's some hope on the horizon for this, but it's definitely going to be a lot of battles between now and then. But if they keep grinding away at it, I actually see some success coming. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap up tonight's live stream. I do have another video or two, if I'm efficient, that I can get done tonight and record. Thank you guys so much for logging in, for asking these questions tonight. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. Let me know your comments down below, what you think both of tonight's live stream or any other questions you might have missed, or what you think of the two new changes that I've made on the video channel. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section down below this video. And otherwise, just remember, if you want to make a difference, you got to show up. It's not easy. It's not simple. Success is not guaranteed, but I guarantee if you stay at home, failure is certain. So if you don't show up, failure is the only option you get. And I'd rather be showing up and having at least a chance at some level of success. And I do know it takes a lot of work and it takes time. So with that, guys, thank you so much. We will talk to you again soon.